Okay, let's dive into one of, well, humanity's really big questions. Do we actually have free will?
Mm,
It feels so obvious, doesn't it? Like you're the one writing your own story, making all these choices every single day.
absolutely. From tiny things to huge life decisions.
Yeah, grabbing coffee, changing careers. That feeling that you're in control is just, it's powerful. It feels instinctive.
It really is. It's fundamental to how most of us experience being alive, that faced with options, you genuinely feel you could have picked differently. The decision stops with you.
Exactly. But what if that feeling, that really deep sense of agency is, well, maybe not the complete picture.
Yeah.
We've got a stack of sources here that really dig into this whole puzzle. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the arguments, challenge that gut feeling a bit, and explore some fascinating, maybe even slightly unsettling ideas.
Yeah, and it's not just some abstract philosophical game, is it?
Not at all. It gets right to the heart of who we think we are, how we
Yeah.
see ourselves, how we see others.
Right. And the tension is there immediately. That feeling of being in the driver's seat versus some pretty surprising science suggesting maybe, maybe not.
So let's start with the basics. How do these sources actually define free will, before they start questioning it?
Okay. So typically, the material defines it as the capacity to choose between different possible actions,
Hmm.
unimpeded.
Unimpeded, right.
Yeah, meaning you have real control. This is key, that control is independent of outside pressures or even your own internal, like, biological programming. You really could have gone left instead of right at that junction.
Okay, that makes sense. That's the classic idea. But then science comes along and, well, complicates things a lot.
Definitely. The sources spend quite a bit of time on Benjamin Libet's work from the 80s, neuroscientist.
Ah, yes. Libet, tell us about those experiments. They're pretty famous, right?
They are, and genuinely groundbreaking, caused a huge stir. So basically, he had people do something simple, like flexing their wrist
Mm.
whenever they just felt the urge.
Okay, spontaneous action.
Right. And they had to watch this special clock and note the exact moment they first became aware, consciously aware, of their decision or intention to move.
Got it.
Meanwhile, Livet's measuring their brain activity, specifically something called the readiness potential, brain signals that gear up before a movement.
And the bombshell was,
The bombshell was that this readiness potential consistently started building up before the person reported feeling the conscious intention to move, sometimes hundreds of milliseconds before.
hold on, so the brain was already preparing the action before the person consciously felt like they'd decided?
That's exactly what the data showed.
Okay, wow. That really forces a question, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Who's actually in charge here? Is it the you that you experience consciously, or is your brain running the show behind the scenes?
And the sources dig into that implication, the sort of uncomfortable one?
They do. One interpretation, a strong one, is that our feeling of making a conscious decision might be more like a commentary, a post-event justification, as some put it.
So the brain acts, and then our conscious mind quickly creates a story about us choosing to act.
Kind of like that, yeah. It feels like we initiated it, but maybe we're just becoming aware of something already in motion. Our internal press secretary announcing a decision already made elsewhere.
That's tricky to get your head around. But the material doesn't just stick with brain timings, does it? It talks about loads of other influences.
Right, it zooms out quite a bit. Beyond just the immediate neuroscience, think about everything that's shaped you, your brain, your tendencies over your whole life.
Okay, like what?
Well, the sources list things like, your genetics, obviously,
Yep.
your upbringing, the culture you're swimming in,
Yeah.
the media you consume, any past traumas,
Mm-hmm.
even just your physical state right now,
Mm.
how much sleep you got, your hormone levels, maybe even, believe it or not, the temperature of the room you're in.
That list just keeps growing. It feels almost deterministic when you lay it all out.
It can feel that way. And the key point the sources hammer home is that these aren't just tiny nudges. They are powerful forces, often working completely unconsciously. They shape your biases, your moods, your gut reactions, basically setting the stage for any choice you think you're making.
So it forces you to ask, right? With all that stuff influencing you, biology, environment, history, are you really choosing freely? Or are you more like reacting in a way that's kind of inevitable given all those prior causes?
Let's make it concrete. The sources use a great example, ordering black coffee.
Okay, simple choice. Seems free enough.
Seems like it, but dig down. Why black?
Hmm?
Maybe your dad always drank it black, so it feels right so consciously. Or you saw an article last week about cutting out dairy.
Or maybe an ex always ordered complicated milky drinks and this is a subtle pushback.
Exactly. Or maybe your brain just links that bitter taste with focus or getting work done. These aren't things you consciously weigh up in the moment, usually.
But they're there under the surface, pushing you towards black coffee. So you feel like you just decided, but actually, layers of history and biology were nudging you hard.
Yeah, invisible but incredibly powerful influences, as the sources phrase it. They make certain options just feel more appealing, more obvious, shaping the whole landscape of your choice.
So if our actions are driven by unconscious brain stuff and all these deep influences, does the source material just say, nope, no free will, game over?
Not quite. It gets more nuanced. This is where they bring in a philosophical idea called compatibilism.
Compatibilism. Okay, what's that about?
It's basically an attempt to make determinism, the idea that everything is caused by prior events, compatible with some notion of freedom.
How does that work? Seems contradictory.
Well, compatibilists argue that you can still be considered free if your actions are caused by your own internal states, like your desires, your beliefs, your character, rather than being forced on you by something external.
Okay. So freedom isn't freedom from causes, but freedom from being, like, physically pushed or coerced by someone else.
You got it. Freedom from external constraint. The analogy the sources use is being a ship captain.
Right, I remember that one.
You didn't choose the ship, you didn't choose the ocean currents, the weather, maybe even the destination your company gave you. Those are all predetermined constraints, right?
Sure.
But you are still the one at the helm, steering through the waves, using your skills, making decisions based on the reality you face.
So that act of navigating, steering according to your own judgment and abilities within those constraints, that's where they see a kind of freedom.
Exactly. It's freedom to act according to who you are, even if who you are was shaped by things you didn't choose. Your actions flow from your internal psychology, not external force.
Okay, that offers a middle ground. But still, if we seriously consider that strong, absolute free will might be an illusion, the sources stress that the implications are enormous.
Oh, they're huge, profound. It potentially shakes up our entire way of thinking about society, especially things like responsibility, morality, blame, praise.
Justice itself.
Right. If someone's actions are ultimately the result of factors they didn't consciously control, their genes, their difficult childhood, their brain wiring, how can we really hold them morally responsible in the way we usually do?
How can you say they deserve punishment or deserve praise if the choice wasn't truly up to them in that absolute sense?
Precisely. It challenges the whole notion of just deserts.
The sources bring up thinkers like Sam Harris, right, who argue that letting go of the illusion of free will could actually make us better, more compassionate.
Yes, that's a key perspective. The argument is, if you see bad behavior not as like pure evil springing from nowhere, but as the endpoint of a chain of unfortunate causes.
Bad luck, basically. Bad biological luck, bad environmental luck.
Kind of a tough upbringing, maybe genetic predisposition, social factors, trauma. If you see it that way, it's harder to feel just pure hatred or vengeance.
You might feel pity, or at least understand it as something that could happen to anyone given the right or wrong circumstances.
Exactly. It could shift the focus from just blaming and punishing towards understanding the causes and figuring out how to prevent similar harm in the future. More compassion, less retribution.
That's a compelling argument for letting go of the idea, but then there's a twist.
A big one. The sources highlight a really fascinating counterpoint. The practical value of just believing in free will, whether it's ultimately real or not.
Right. What does the evidence show there?
Well, there are studies, quite compelling ones mentioned, where researchers essentially told participants that free will is an illusion. And what happened?
What?
Those people became significantly more likely to cheat on tests, to lie, to be less helpful, even to give up sooner on difficult tasks.
Wow. So undermining the belief in free will seems to undermine motivation and moral behavior.
It looks that way. It
Yeah.
seems that believing we are agents, that we make real choices and are responsible for them, might be functionally really important for personal drive, achievement, even for holding society together.
That's a paradox, isn't it? The illusion might be useful, maybe even necessary.
It certainly looks like a possibility. Maybe this feeling of agency, even if not perfectly reflecting reality, serves as a crucial evolutionary or psychological purpose for us.
Okay, so this deep dive is leaving us with a really complex picture, isn't it? It's not a simple yes or no. Are we just puppets of our biology and circumstances? Or are we something more?
Definitely not simple. The sources really paint a very nuanced view. It seems less about absolute freedom versus absolute determinism and maybe more about Degrees of freedom.
Degrees of freedom. I like that. Tell me more about that idea.
Well, it shifts the focus. Maybe becoming fully human, or more free in a meaningful sense, isn't about somehow escaping all these influences, our genes, our past, the world around us. That seems impossible, right?
Right. Can't escape your own history or biology.
But maybe freedom lies more in awareness, in becoming more conscious of those influences, understanding our own patterns, our biases, the external pressures, and then learning to navigate them more consciously, with more intention, maybe more integrity.
So it's not about being influence-free, but about the process of recognizing and working with those influences.
Exactly. It's the striving, the reflecting, the trying to steer the ship, even if the ship, the weather, the map weren't entirely our choice. That ongoing effort is the crucial part.
That feels, well, it feels more actionable somehow. Less about a metaphysical debate and more about how we live.
Mm-hmm. It suggests that something like freedom might emerge from that very struggle for self-awareness and the effort to act in line with our considered values, regardless of the underlying deterministic chains.
So, reflecting on this whole deep dive, we started with that gut feeling of control, then faced the challenges from neuroscience like Libet, the huge list of environmental and biological influences.
Looked at philosophical attempts to reconcile things like compatibilism.
Wrestled with the massive implications for responsibility and morality, and then hit that surprising twist about the practical need to believe in free will.
Yeah, the sources weave together this really rich tapestry, unconscious processes, hidden influences, and our powerful subjective experience of choosing.
And maybe the final thought to leave everyone chewing on drawn from this material is this. Whether or not absolute uncaused free will is real, perhaps the real significance lies in how we live as if we do.
Mm.
You know, the striving, the self-reflection, the attempt to navigate all those influences consciously. Maybe that process, that effort itself, is the most profoundly human, maybe even the most free thing we do.
It puts the value squarely on the human effort, the engagement with life's constraints and possibilities.
Definitely a lot to think about as you go through your day, making what feel like your choices. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.